pjnet.tv, 9 o'clock, 9:01. Ooh, we're a minute late. Sorry about that, folks. It's worth the wait. We have a first-time guest standing by in our green room. First-time guest number 260, I believe. I haven't lost count. Our bumper's running. We are streaming live. Hit the record button and all that. Everybody in the chat room's waiting. I'll shut up now. Let's start a countdown to Studio 40 Alpha. Well, hey, good evening. Welcome. This is pjnet.tv. I'm Coach Prasek, and I'm glad to be here. I hope you are too. In fact, I'm glad that you're here. For those of you who may be watching this on maybe YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or wherever, we are so glad that you stopped scrolling long enough to catch this, and we want to earn your business. We want to earn your attention, so we bring everyday Christians to share their stories, share their walk with Christ, and that's what we do, and I hope that that will be encouraging and inspiring to you. If you would like, if you're watching this live, if you'll go to pjnet.tv, you can watch it live there, and there's a family of friends that you may not have met yet. It's the sweetest fellowship on the internet. You can watch the same program there if you would like. But from wherever you see this, welcome, and we want to introduce our guest tonight. Nancy Head. I'm going to put her name on the screen. I literally had to ask Nancy how to pronounce her last name because you just don't know. Nancy is up in the stormy cold of Pennsylvania, so I thought we would set the outdoor scenery more acclimated to her environment rather than mine, where it is like 80 degrees. But y'all are actually having some bad weather.
We are. We had 4 inches of snow yesterday afternoon, and it kept snowing. My husband's a retired meteorologist. And when we went to bed, he said it was 4.5 inches. But he said that doesn't mean we got 4.5 inches of snow. We would have had 10 inches of snow if the ground hadn't been so warm that it melted when it came down. So it was an unbelievable, unprecedented April storm for April 18th to have that kind of snow. And today there was a brief period. I looked out the window. I'm a teacher. I looked out the window at school, and I couldn't see 50 feet into the playground. It was really crazy. So it's what kind of summer must be on its way? We have blooming trees out there coated in snow. The lilacs have not started to. They budded, but they haven't blossomed yet. And I like it when the blossoms come out, especially when the lilacs bloom. They're my favorite. And it's really nice if it gets just a little bit cool after the lilacs blossom out. Mm-hmm. Then you can enjoy them. I had big lilacs in front of my house one year, and it turned to 93 degrees, and they were gone in 3 days. I hardly had a chance to smell them before they were gone. So this way, the snow came, the lilacs aren't out yet, and we're really hoping that it's not 93 degrees next week.
Nancy, we're going to talk about your past and your future and your present, but let's go way back. You've been a teacher, but you've actually got some experience in radio, I understand.
I was a radio news reporter from 1992 to 1996, and at WRTA 1240 News Talk Radio in Altoona, Pennsylvania. I did the news, and this crazy meteorology guy did the weather. And he was up in Bedford, Massachusetts doing the weather. And after we got to know each other a little bit, and it started to take a longer time to tape the weather. And this is the old reel to reel. I mean, it's back in the dark ages of radio with reel to reel tapes.
Right.
And
Revox, B22 Revox is what we used to use. The Revox.
Oh, and the carts.
Yeah.
Back tapes, back in the old days.
Folks, that's short for cartridge. It's kind of like an 8-track cartridge, but it's got a hole in the bottom of it, and this little rubber wheel flips up and and you can start that car. That's where you keep all the commercials.
That's where you keep the commercials and the intro to the news,
Mm-hmm.
and all the sound bites we did
Sound
on
bites.
cart. Yeah, and you introed your sound bite and pushed the button, and it played, and it was great.
Yeah, yeah. We had a Sparta in the control room, but we had automation. So you had these huge wheels that you loaded these carts into it, and that was the automation. That was fantastic. I mean,
It would
and
be.
oh gosh, I wish I could just go back. Of course, everything's digital now.
You're right.
But back then it was mechanical analog. Those carts that wheel would rotate like a, kind of like a, what do you call those things? The jukebox.
Ah,
It would rotate,
oh,
and then when it got to
wow.
the right position, it would push the cartridge into where the playhead was. And then when it got done, it'd pull it back out and rotate around and load up. We had 3 carts. It was a marvel. Gosh, I miss radio.
It, wa- I didn't know. We had human beings who put the card in and then pulled it out when it was done.
Oh yeah, we had them in the studio. And remember you had the little hand eraser, which was an electromagnet. Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
you just burst this thing with a bunch of magnetic noise, and it would effectively erase it.
Yep.
They're incredible. Yeah, you could drop them, and everything was fine, no problems.
I erased a tape that I wasn't supposed to erase once.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, producer he didn't talk to me for a couple of days.
yeah. I bet
But
he'd never done anything like
uh,
that.
yeah. Well, I remember one day, and I thought this was my last day in radio. We were real big on election coverage.
Hmm.
I mean, our station was, you tuned in on election night to hear what the results were because we had them. And I went out to the courthouse and I phoned in all the numbers. And of course we were up late. And then the next day we were in early and they were updating. The day after, when, you come down, all that big letdown.
Hmm.
And we were in the program director's office telling jokes. And when we were done telling jokes, the morning girl went home and I went to the newsroom and I started to tell stories. And I'm fairly new, my first election there. I had started in the summer and now it's the fall. And she always told me, if there's a story that strikes you funny, just turn it over and go to the next story. And most of it was wire copy.
Hmm.
And I just remember, there was a monk, if you remember back in the 90s, occasionally the Buddhist monks would set themselves on fire in some sort of protest.
Right.
And of course, there was the Buddhist monk who set himself on fire and his friends videotaped it. And I had this thought that, wow, with friends like that, who needs enemies? And then I carefully flipped it. And then the next story was about this guy who had drugs hidden in his shoes at the airport. And some dog at the airport figured out that he was a drug dog, caught this guy, and when the man surrendered his shoes, the newscast was over because I couldn't stop laughing. And I cracked up and I couldn't control myself and I could barely get out. Here's the weather. And then I yelled down the hall, I'm not coming back because I know. And so, the production guys got to put in an extra commercial or something or some promo. And I thought, well, this was a fun job. I wonder what job I'll get next. And I went down the hall to the program director's office, and what a wonderful God moment. He said to me, there were 5 minutes left. There was 5 minutes left in the newscast when it happened to me. And it's just like what you said before. Well, when did he do it? And it's like,
Hmm.
because this guy had been in radio forever, and he was such a pro and such a kind man. And I thought I would be in big trouble. And he's like, I got the feeling, sooner or later, happens to if you're in radio, it's going to happen to you too.
Hmm.
And what
Yeah.
a great moment of grace. I really appreciated it.
Yeah. Yeah. It was everything was live, and yeah, there were some embarrassing moments I think we could all reminisce about. But you didn't stay in radio, I don't think. I think you pursued a career that you're still pursuing, teaching.
Well, I went from radio. It's been a little time. When my husband and I got married, I remained unemployed for a little while, just kind of adjust, a blended family, my two sons and my husband and I, and we did kind of, uh, I mentioned this in the book that my husband spoke rural and my kids spoke suburban. And they really didn't understand each other a whole lot. And my husband came from the farmland where you get up early, and my kids were stay up late people because kids went to school and in the summer they worked, and the only time kids had to socialize with other kids is late at night because you might work in the morning and I work in the afternoon, and or a lot of teenager jobs are in the evenings, and so the kids would stay up late at night, and it was kind of an adjustment. But I ended up in newspaper for a little while. That was eye opening because you write a story for radio news and it's 30 seconds long, and if sometimes even the advertising in newspaper was based on how many inches the story was going to be about
Mm-hmm.
your whatever entity it was. Because you got to make the story longer. So it was really good practice for you can only write 30-second things for so long before your ability to write longer things is a little stunted.
Mm.
So I was in newspaper, and then I got hired at a school, a classical Christian school, and classical education. And oh my goodness, I wish I'd had this education. I wish my children had had this. What a wonderful education this is. So I've been around the block in local Christian schools. The classical Christian schools, not really, it wasn't really a good fit in this community. Probably would have done better down up the road here at, near Penn State. It's in State College. But what a great foundation. So yes, teaching in a Christian school. I have two grandsons in my classroom this year. Three grandsons have already graduated from my classroom, are out into the world, and I'm expecting a granddaughter, and one in next year, one the year after. So I'm cycling through the grandchildren in my classroom, making them read the books that I want them to read. It's wonderful to have this. And what a great blessing to be able to speak truth and light into their lives through literature.
Well, Nancy, everything that you've said thus far makes your life a picture of sunshine and blue jays. But that's really not true.
No, and even today, it's still not. When I was 28 and a half, I had my fifth child. And they were 9.5 from the oldest to the youngest, 9.5 years. And I had a daughter, a son, a daughter, and two boys at the end. And when the youngest was 7 months old, my husband left, and there we were by ourselves. And I hadn't worked in 11 years, being home with the children. By the time I went back to work, a couple of years had passed. I went to work as a bank teller, and what I learned within the first year or so was that a banking career is probably not the best career path for me. I had a tendency to transpose numbers, and I did make it through about 3.5, 4 years at the bank. 3, 7, 19, yeah. I think it was close to 4 years I made it at the bank. I went to school at a certain point. My father was urging me to go to college, get a degree. And, looking at the bank and thinking, and looking at what people in the bank were doing, and realizing I really don't want to be standing here cashing checks 20 years from now.
Hmm.
A really good job, a nice job, a family friendly job in a lot of regards. Just not me. I
Hmm.
wanted to talk about ideas, not CD rates. So, and it took me a while in college. I knew I needed a degree, and I couldn't figure out what I was going to get a degree in. And people would ask me, and I ended up getting a degree in English. And people would say to me, oh, "What are you going to do with an English degree?" I was like, "Well,
Teach
I didn't
English.
know to teach English,
That's all you're
and
going to do.
the opportunities. Radio and newspaper really helped me a lot, but it was tough, and there were some very difficult times. Working, going to school, getting the kids to school, making sure everybody's got the shoes they need and the glasses they need and the haircuts they need, and just and and dealing with the wounds that everybody had and some scars that people still carry even today. So, and nobody gets into adulthood unscathed. There's something that happens to everybody, but the wounds of divorce are pretty hard for the quote victimized one, which there's enough blame always to go around, but there's usually the person who was left, and the kids feel um, torn, very torn, and so that was very difficult. There was also, of course, the financial aspect of at a certain point when I was finishing up school and I didn't have a job and we're basically living on child support and student loan money. And there were some hungry days, and people at church, the church was very supportive, but there are times when people aren't really aware of what you need. And if you get food stamps, that's terrific. You can go buy groceries. You can't buy toilet paper or shampoo. Well, you need toilet paper and shampoo, and the shampoo is particularly important if you have teenagers, because their appearance is very important to them. So we did without quite a bit. I do remember this one particular very lean time. We were waiting for a domestic relations hearing to determine support, and we were running out. I mean, I was out of sugar. I was out of tea bags. Running out of peanut butter hot dogs. The stays
Mm-hmm.
of staples of single motherhood, and it was getting bad. And I sat down at my dining room table one day, opened my Bible, and I'm as I recall, it must have been chance. Who looks up the third chapter of Habakkuk on purpose?
Oh yeah,
So I
yeah.
I wasn't familiar with the third chapter of
Oh, I've
Habakkuk, and
memorized it. Yeah, yeah.
there you go.
Refresh my
Exactly.
memory though, would you?
Yes. And to paraphrase, a very loose paraphrase, the stalls are empty, the fields are empty, there isn't anything. But I will rejoice in the Lord. I thought, okay, Lord, I rejoice, and that was it. That was, and I thought, well, I closed my Bible, and I thought that was the lesson for the day. Rejoice anyway. Rejoice anyway. The next day, I go out to get the mail, and it's a stack of bills. Can't pay them. Um, and stuck in there are 2 envelopes from Penn State. And I've never heard of anybody this happened to, except me. And inside one envelope was a check for $1,300. It
Mm.
said, remainder of your student loan account. I didn't buy enough books, I guess. So the other check was my $50 deposit from Pick. It was a little disappointing to get $50 after the $1,300. I was kind
Mm.
of ripping the other envelope up, like, ooh, what's in here? $50. It was the application deposit that I'd made 4 years earlier, and we paid back a little bit for every creditor. I owe you, and I owe you, and here's a tiny little piece. Took the kids and put them in the car, and we went out to the grocery store. Everybody got to pick something they wanted, not just food to eat, but that kind of cereal or that particular dessert or just some little treat that you got to enjoy, because we got this huge blessing. It was never that bad ever again, and I think that it was so that I could see the hand of God in meeting my need, so the children could see the hand of God meeting our need. But so we would learn to rejoice anyway. I'm not always as good as that as I should be. To rejoice anyway. But I didn't. I find it harder when there's times when you feel challenged and you feel alone. It's more difficult for me to convince myself that I am alone, because I know from experiences like that with things that came just at the right time, and we knew some hunger, and we knew doing without, and the kids didn't always have the clothes they wanted to have, and they certainly didn't have the CDs to listen to, or whatever, the entertainment that they would have always had. We didn't always have cable television even. Now I didn't even have a television, but that intervention from God of, I see you, and I see your need, and I brought you to the brink here with this lesson about rejoicing. And once you got the lesson, then I filled your need. And so we have to keep that in mind too. So those are important things. What really resonated with me was the way the occasional God meeting that need right in time for Christmas, or right in time for just some lesson to be learned. But the way the church came around us and said, "Here, our Sunday school class wants to give you your Thanksgiving dinner." My coworkers, I put your name in for our coworkers for our company. We do Christmas, and everybody in your family is going to get a set of gifts, like Santa Claus gifts, and just the way that people met our needs. And what I could also see, that there were needs people were unaware of, that were, again, you can't buy toilet paper with food stamps. So we were our Rotary Club was collecting materials that we're going to give to. I put toilet paper in it, because if you have it's kind of I'm thinking the government missed something here with the whole food stamp program. You ought to be able to buy toilet paper. Personal hygiene. I mean, that's the kind of thing that relates to your health. You need to have that. Yeah, we need. It's modern day. People need to not worry about where the toilet paper is coming from. So, so we need to kind of see each other's needs. We need to see how to help people, and we need to see how to help people in a way that lifts people up. And one of those ways was the government was, I had subsidized daycare when I was working at the bank. When I went to school full time, even though I was still working at the bank, I was a full time student. I lost my subsidized daycare. Well, I still need to go to work, and I need somebody to watch my children when I'm at school. And so I could still get daycare through the subsidized agency. It was going to cost me 9 times as much. So more than that, a little bit more than nine. So for a ninefold increase in my childcare costs. And people from the church stepped up. And the ironic thing was, when I had subsidized daycare, I was paying $5 a week for 2 children. And my very last caregiver was going to feed my son lunch every day. And she was going to buy the food and feed him lunch every day. And she would not allow me to pay her more than $5 a week. And I know he was eating more than that. So, but it was just this God thing of, you started out at $5 and you ended up at $5, and I got you through. And when everybody else, when they were all in school, they were old enough basically for some grandparent supervision for my oldest daughter, who grew up faster than maybe she should have. And she told me one time, another God thing that she used to complain about when she was a teenager. Of course, she's saddled with 4 siblings and fighting with her brother, who didn't understand why she should be able to tell him what to do. Normal stuff. And when she had her baby when she was 20 years old, she said, "I know what to do. I know how to take care of him." So it all has come together in a good way, that we have 5 productive adults, who 4 who have married and had children, and who are successful. In my one daughter's renewing her marriage vows tomorrow, 20 years.
Hmm.
And this is the 3rd child. So my oldest daughter she had 4 children. She's got 2 grandchildren now. So many years have passed, but I think that everyone manages money well, or married somebody who manages money well. There isn't a credit card debt problem for anybody. And I think a lot of that goes back to, we know what it's like to be hungry, and we want to
Hmm.
manage our lives in a way that we don't go there. And so it was bad, and it was so good for them to have, nobody would choose that. You don't choose any of that ever for your children, but they're better people because they went through that. And we saw ministry from the church. We saw ministry from people in our community, and just encouraging. And one of the main messages of Restoring the Shattered is that the church can lift people out of poverty, and do it by encouraging them with material needs, and just encouragement. Just the encouragement of, here's how you can get through college. Here's how you need to deal with this class and that class. Here's how, writing papers and all the things that I had to do. I realized I lived life backwards. Most people go to college, and then they get married and have kids. And having kids is preparation or having, excuse me, college, staying up all night, those all-nighters and things you do is preparation for having children. And I realized that I had children that prepared me to go to college. So I could stay up until 5 o'clock in the morning and write a paper if I had to. And but the church encouraging me, the pro-life community around me encouraging me, people from different denominations lifting us up out of poverty and encouraging us to encouraging me toward an independence that the government programs weren't encouraging me to. I had a caseworker who was reminding me that my child was young enough that if I quit my job, I could get more welfare money. I was like, I said, no, I think I want to show them work. And there were hard moments. There were times when people would come in to collect their food stamps and their welfare check, and then tell me, oh, we're going to take the kids to the beach today. Like, okay, I'm at work. My kids are home doing chores. Yeah, but the hard thing is sometimes the better thing.
Well, clearly, that situation impacted you at the time. Before I move on, for those of you that are getting nervous, thinking you're going too long, Coach, well, Dale Didway, who normally would appear at the bottom of the hour, called yesterday, and was traveling and didn't know he was going to make it back. So we have rescheduled Dale Didway for tomorrow night at 9 p.m. So no, I have not lost track of the time. We have extra time. Nancy, as I mentioned, the situation impacted you then. You've been through some hardships. And I think for those who have never been down that road, they reach out and offer help to those that need it. And there's a joy in their heart. But I don't know that they truly understand what it's like to be on the other end of that help. It actually, in many ways, hurts.
Yes, sometimes it does. One of the things that I wanted to also bring up, though, that was really important was we have the physical need and we have the encouragement. But the people, my married friends who were in good, stable families, invited us into their homes and let my kids see mom and dad functioning together and having it work. And I know that there were a lot of those people in a lot of those situations. My brother and his wife, my dad and my stepmother, my mother had passed away. Being these stable figures in their lives. And I think that had it gone on further, longer than it did, until I got out of college and I got a job and we began to pay our own bills and things like that, had it gone on longer in their lives where we were dependent, it would have done a great deal of harm. And it's one of the things that I wrote about in my book, that I remember being at the bank and I had gone in with one of my kids into the bank, where I had not worked before. So we had 10 branches of Mellon Bank that used to be in central Pennsylvania. And I went into this branch where I had never worked, and I said, I'm here for my food stamps, and put down whatever ID I needed. And my son's probably about 7 or 8 years old. And the teller didn't know who I was, did not realize I was a bank employee, probably assumed I wasn't an employee at all, anywhere. And boy, was she rude. She was nasty. And I was going to say something. I'm your coworker. I am not some lazy bum. I realize you resent me taking food stamps. But I was standing there with my son, and I realized, I looked down and I thought, I don't think he's realized how rude she is. He seems to not be paying attention. And if I defend myself, he's going to become aware of this and maybe remember it. So I chose not to say anything. I chose to take her disdain for me and walk away with my food stamps. But I remembered that. And then I saw another time My youngest son needed it was a I but sometimes you have 5 kids, you pull up in front of the grocery store and you give one of them money and let them run in and buy me a newspaper, please. Run in and buy 3 donuts for so everybody can have a donut. And let the oldest child run in. Well, this was finally it felt a little safer back then, and my youngest son got old enough, and I was going to allow him to go into the store for the very first time by himself and make a purchase. And I gave him, I think, a dollar or two in food stamps, and he was going to go in and buy his snack for the school party the next day. And so now, from the clerk's perspective, what he saw was some ragamuffin kid with food stamps come in and pick a bag of junk off the shelf, you know, cheese nips or something, cheese puffs, and come and pay for it. And I saw this guy. I pulled up. Of course, my baby going into the store alone. So I pulled up in front of the big window so I could see where he was in there and make sure, if he took too long, I was going to come in after him. So but I could see this, and I could see the way that the clerk was looking at him like he was just a piece of dirt, spending his food stamps here. And I was tempted to get out of the car and go in and say something again. Tempted again. And I realized my son is walking on air with his newfound privilege of being allowed to this independence, being like the big kids. And I stayed in the car. And the question I ask as I recount these incidents, how long does it take until you look up and realize how they're looking at you? And what does that do in your heart? What's that cause that causes the wound where you see yourself as not worthy of ever being independent, not capable of being independent because of the way the world has looked down on you? And it was interesting to me that people at church saw me as somebody in need who deserved help. And people in the store, the bank, saw me as somebody who's maybe playing the system and taking advantage of it. And they were working. So kind of the way I felt when somebody came in and got their food stamps and said, "We're going to the beach today." So, but not knowing my situation either. And again, I freely admit I was a little jealous. I missed being able to put my kids in the car and do picnics like that like we did when they were younger. So it's a matter of keeping it all straight in your head and not and realizing that a girl I saw sitting on a street corner on a November day. It's bitter, and she's sitting there with a sign, and I pulled the car over. This was what my husband and I came up with this idea. I think it was his idea that when you see a homeless person, you don't want to give them money because they're just going to spend it on drugs or booze. We would buy McDonald's gift cards and give that because there's a McDonald's across the street from where this girl was sitting. She could go in there, she could get cleaned up, she could eat a hot meal, and she could sit there for a while, not be in the cold. But I realized later on, and she came. I pulled over. I honked the horn. She came over, and I handed her. I put my purse in the floor of the back seat, and I handed the card out through the window that was only down that much, and I drove away. And I never saw her again. I should have gotten out of the car, and I should have said, "What's your story?" And maybe I could have given. I don't know. Maybe I still just give her a McDonald's card and walk away. Maybe I could have done something else. So, but that girl had a story. She was young, at 16 to 20, in there somewhere, and she had a story. And I don't know where she went. Maybe she was playing the system too. And you're pretty safe giving away a gift card. I think it was a really good idea that my husband had. And then we've given away. Sometimes when we go to, you mentioned when we were off the air, visiting Pittsburgh, and usually when we decide we're going to take a day trip to Pittsburgh, we'll go over to McDonald's, spend $50 in gift cards. It doesn't take long to give them away, and you kind of Holy Spirit a little bit. One day we had given them all away, and some guy came up to my husband and said, "I haven't eaten. I really need to eat." And Paul took $5 out of his wallet and handed it to the guy, and the guy ran into the McDonald's that was right there. Like, okay, because he was really he really was hungry. So I have given him more, but I think it was $5. And back then you could still get something for $5 at
Yeah.
McDonald's pretty well actually. So we tend to, as Americans, I think, especially if we're successful, to be judgy, and we don't know somebody's story. And there are people out there. I remember uh, one of the things that my husband and I did. We've been to China twice to teach English as a second language. Amazing, mind blowing, world changing, life changing experience. But I remember seeing a guy holding a child, and the child had the bloated, malnutrition belly,
All right.
and this guy is begging for money. And a big language barrier, of course. It's unlikely that he speaks English. And the part of the point of going to China is that you don't speak Chinese because they want them to learn. They want them to have to speak English to learn that. So I had, there's no way of me asking, but the question that popped into my head was, why is the child malnourished and the man is not? How easy is it to find a malnourished, abandoned child in China? Anywhere really, but in China, we don't see them too often in America. And I got the feeling that if I gave this guy any of my money, he would use it to eat. He wasn't going to feed the child anyway. Otherwise, the child would have not looked with a bloated belly, malnourished. So there are times when you keep walking, but we don't know everybody's story. And I should have gotten out of the car that day and asked that girl her story. Um, but the gift cards is a way to protect yourself from feeling like I'm feeding somebody's drug habit or I'm feeding somebody's booze habit. Um, when you're just giving away fast food, what else are they going to do with it besides eat? So um, another thing is socks. And isn't that sound simple? But it's another thing to put in the basket that the Rotarians are giving away if you have the chance, or that your church is giving away. Homeless people don't have socks, and it, there are so many simple things that we take for granted: the ability to take a bath, toilet paper, socks, just being able to eat whenever you want, whatever you want. It's I got a letter from my compassion child who thanked me for her gift, and she used it to buy food. And that's the first letter like that I've ever gotten from a compassion child that said I used it to buy food. So there are people with needs around us and out in the world, beyond our physical touch, that we can minister to in an effective way. And I don't know if you lift somebody out of poverty by giving them a $5 gift card, but letting them to go into a place like McDonald's where they can get cleaned up. You're on the street for about 3 days before you're unemployable. So if when you become homeless, a story I included in the book is my friend Ann ran she had a pro life storefront, and if you wanted pro life information, she rented this little place near her house, and people would come in and talk, and she would explain the pro life perspective. And one day this couple came in. We walked down the street. They came in and they said, we moved to this town. We got in the car. We came to this town. We used all our resources to get here because he was promised a job and the job fell through. And now we have no place to stay and we have no resources. We have nothing. And she went up to her house, got them pots and pans and towels and washcloths and whatever they needed. And she let them stay in her office for a couple of days, and she arranged first and last month's rent, found them an apartment, took care of them, got them what they needed, because once they had an address, they could get some government help. And after a few weeks, a month or so, he got a job and they were independent. And she lost track of them. Some people just need a little hand up. There was a guy at our local food bank who told the story about this girl who would come in, and it's the amazing assumption that we all make, that I made when he was telling the story. This is an 18-year-old girl who's got 3 children, and I know what everybody in the audience assumed the same thing I did too. No, she was married. She was married to the father of the children, and he couldn't get a job because he couldn't get full-time work because he didn't have a GED. So the guy who runs the food bank walks with him through this GED process. and they don't come to the food bank anymore. It, it's, you get to know somebody's story, and sometimes it really doesn't take that much to get them to independence. And
Amazing.
isn't that what we're about?
Amazing. Nancy, I'm glad we had extra time. Your stories, we're all broken in so many ways. And sometimes we don't see the needs around us. We're so self-centered. And you've got some pretty creative approaches into helping others on what you call a path to independence. When we get to heaven, you're going to find out probably more than you know. There's a bunch more, in my opinion, in all likelihood. But Nancy, folks, I've put her website on the screen. You can connect with her, nancyhead.com. Her book has been up there, and Nancy, you have blessed us as you have already blessed many others, and you've been the recipient of so many blessings, and it's a blessing for you to share your stories with us here on pjnet.tv, and I sure do appreciate it. You've encouraged us all. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a blessing for me.
Glad to do it. Nancy Head here on pjnet.tv. I hope that you were encouraged. I hope that you were challenged. What good is encouragement without being challenged? Really? Yeah? Is that right, Coach? Yeah, it is. That is. Challenge. I have one for you. It's a challenge that I issue myself. And it works for me. Maybe it'll work for you. It's 2 questions. The first question is this. What is the boldest thing that you have ever done for Jesus Christ? Second question. How long ago was that? The challenge is to never be satisfied with either answer.